in a moment. So I'm just going to do, oh, there we go. So just do a couple of, a bit of a talk through what we're going to see today, just in 5 minutes, and I'll hand over to our speakers. We've got a lot of really good speakers today. We've got about 5 people going to be talking to you about open data. So we're going to start with James Madison, who's a senior consultant at the Open Data Institute, talking about the impact and value of open data. We're then going to have Jevon from the County Council give an intro into the Essex Open Data platform. It's all of our platform. It's you know, we can all use it. So what is it? Jevon will give us a tour of it, a demo into some of the resources that are on there, and a quick guide on how you might want to contribute and upload your own data to the platform. So you'll learn how to create an account and upload stuff. We'll have Tom Mcgregor talking to us about IG and the considerations, you know, in terms of how we need to work with IG on this. We'll then hear from Sean Cook, who we've just put a new resource on there, which is our joint strategic needs assessment. We've done joint strategic needs assessments for years, but actually it's a new approach and how we've put it on the open data platform. So again, Sean will talk us through that. And then finally, we'll have Lucy Clayton from Fire Service talking about the impact and how it's helped their work by putting some of their data on the open data platform. We were going to have breakout groups at the end, but I think we're going to just have a final sort of 5-10 minute session just on this call with everyone, where we can all contribute with some questions I'll put to you in a sort of word cloud, so we haven't got to break off and then come back in. So we'll just do 5 minutes at the end, if that's okay. So I think that's the session. So if you're, hopefully that's the session you're expecting. So without any further ado, I think I'll hand over to James, if that's okay, James.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Duncan. Give me 1 second to share my screen. I'm not a native Teams user, so hopefully this works. Can everyone see a presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, brilliant. So hi, everyone. My name's James. I'm a senior consultant at the Open Data Institute. And as Duncan said, today I'll be talking a little bit about how we think about value and impact with open data, and also what we've learned through our interactions with some organizations who work very sort of focused on open data stewardship as well. A quick who are we? The Open Data Institute, or ODI as we are often known as. We're a London-based not-for-profit. We work globally. We operate on a vision and mission basis. We have this very lofty ambition of wanting a world where data works for everyone. And we, in reality, try and achieve this by working with companies, governments, and other organizations to try and build open, trustworthy data ecosystems. So that's by doing things like improving the data practices of organizations so that you can build adequate data infrastructure and use data more effectively. That's looking at specific challenges that you might face in a particular ecosystem or sector, and helping to address those through better use of data, and also through research and gathering evidence and knowledge to support some of the thinking around accessing, sharing, and using data as well. At the ODI, we believe that data is fundamental to enabling good decision making. Good decisions that lead to positive impact can only be made when data is stewarded effectively. In other words, collected, maintained, and shared appropriately. Good stewardship of data enables us to create information from that data in the form of products, services, analyses, insights, or stories and visualizations. And at each stage through the kind of data life cycle, from collection or access of the data to the point where decisions are being made, we need to engage with a wide range of people and organizations to ensure that our decisions are informed by collective experience and understanding. While we are the Open Data Institute and open data is very much in our name and nature, we think about data as being on a spectrum of rights to access. So some data shouldn't be shared. This might be data that's sensitive or personal, like employment contracts, for example. We call this data closed data, and that's on the left-hand side of the spectrum. Much of the world's data sits in the shared space, which is often a really kind of complex territory. You might provide access to individual organizations to data on a named access basis, like when you share identification for verification purposes. There might be structures set up that allow group-based access to data, like research collaborations, for example. And data can also be publicly accessible, but have restrictions on how members of the public can use it. So that might be data from your Twitter feed, for example. And then, of course, there's open data, which we're here to talk about today. We describe open data as data that anyone can access, use, and share, which is also published under an open license, like the Open Government license. And bus timetables might be an example of that. Although we work a lot in the shared space these days, we're still very much of the belief that organizations should be as open as possible. And that's not just with data, but also what you do around the data as well. When things are done in isolation, or organizations decide to withhold data because they perceive the data itself to be valuable, that can limit a lot of the positive outcomes that we can create through better use of data. At the ODI, we call this the data hoarding future. To make this more tangible, here's a sort of loose example for you. At the start of the pandemic, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, there are a number of different organizations committed to helping address COVID-19. Organizations collecting symptom tracking data were at the heart of this ecosystem, trying to solve a lot of the problems. And there were many organizations collecting information from people about COVID-19 symptoms to support research, provide information to citizens, and inform government policymaking. This follows the idea that good stewardship of data leads to the creation of useful tools that will help people to make decisions, and many of these tools were publicly available. So that's kind of in line with the theory of change that I just showed you and how we see positive impact being created from data. But in the early stages of the pandemic, much of the data collection was done in silos. So symptom trackers were collecting a lot of similar data, but not sharing what they collected with others who might have been performing a similar service. This makes it hard to compare insights because you can't see the evidence base behind the insights, which ultimately affects the decisions being made, which are supposed to benefit the wider collective. So an example might be that some crucial demographic information, such as a person's sex assigned at birth, might have been missed in early attempts or confused with other terminology such as gender, which led to delays in discovering that there might be different impacts on different types of people. There's also some issues around the lack of standards because of the types of questions being asked and terminology being used. And that causes issues with interoperability of the data sets. And there would also have been some duplication of effort around collection of data, which could have been more streamlined. More openness could have helped these organizations to pool data and other resources as well, and to develop a common approach to their work, which would have ultimately led to better informed outcomes at a much earlier stage. But hindsight is a real gift, isn't it? We encourage organizations to think about applying an open approach to stewarding, creating, and making decisions with data by advocating for data infrastructure that is open, is as open as possible, data literacy and capability for all, and open innovation where possible. So to put this in a kind of a local government context, most of our work with local government and open data has focused on the provision of public services. Through several years of research and practical support in the local gov space, we've identified 3 high-level patterns of open data use within public services. The first one focuses on increasing access to data about services or providing data as a service, which supports innovation and creates trust with citizens. The second one focuses on creating and using insights from open data to make improvements and efficiencies to service. So this could be using open data from other organizations which operate similar services to learn from best practice, using data collected from users, which may be open, such as a community group forum, for example, to improve how the service operates, or using open data about the area you serve, the geographical area you serve, to make decisions about creating new services that might support community needs. And then the final pattern looks at using open data to make better decisions with a particular focus on policy making. This could be using specific insights about your local area, or using national level open data to kind of compare your area to another area. These patterns are all aligned to the thinking and theory of change that I mentioned earlier. Pattern 1 is about better stewardship of data with a particular focus on publishing openly. Patterns 2 and 3 focus on creating with data and making decisions based on the insights that we create. Here are some examples of organizations which we've either supported or worked with over the last 4 to 5 years. We supported Oxfordshire County Council to develop a cycle route audit tool that can be used to assess local cycling routes and help inform local transport policy. Local cycling groups use the tool to map their journeys and identify any issues. And then that data was published openly and also shared as a visual map. And the tool from that is open source. And because the tool, data, and the approach have all been developed openly and well documented, Buckinghamshire County Council were able to replicate the approach for their area at a much lower cost. We supported Bath and North East Somerset Council to create a more open data infrastructure to help the council publish geospatial data for use by the community. The team created a taxonomy to help identify and prioritize data for release, and work with the local open data group Bath Hacked to put that data into use in ways that support the local community. There are a number of lessons to be learned about data licensing in this work that might create barriers to publishing data, and that might be of particular interest to some of the people on this call. Early estimates suggested that shifting to this more open data infrastructure saves the council around £20,000 a year on technology. Leeds City Council is another organisation which one of the ODI's former nodes in the north, ODI Leeds, worked with to consider how open data could be used for better service delivery around bin collection. Up until the Leeds Bin project, the council had been sending local residents regular written reminders about bin collection dates, which is extremely costly and means that the information provided is static, so doesn't account for any deviations from the standard schedule. By shifting to a mobile app, which is enabled by open data where possible and supplemented by necessary licensed data sets, such as the postal address file, Leeds City Council now save around £100,000 a year on mainly the paper-based communications, but also some of the tech considerations as well. And the last one I wanted to share with you was around some work we did with North Lanarkshire Council, which is based in Scotland, to look at how they could transform their approach around publishing non-personal, non-domestic business rates data. At the time, the team were receiving a high volume of FRI requests about that business rates data and finding it very time consuming and costly to respond. And a lot of the requests they were receiving were duplicate asks. They saw this high volume of FOI requests as a service failure. And so they decided to invest in their data publishing capabilities and infrastructure to begin a shift to a culture of publishing open data in line with those specific needs, starting with the non-domestic business rates data. So very much taking a problem-led approach rather than a kind of tech-first approach. This allowed for a much more comprehensive picture of rates to be made available to the public. And the work was recognized in 2018 at the Digital Technology Awards. The main thing I wanted to talk to you about today was a piece of work that we've been delivering in collaboration with our partners, Microsoft, which is looking at what makes open data stewards, so organizations whose primary purpose it is to steward open data that anyone can access, use, and share, actually successful in what they do, and also to learn from the challenges or stumbling blocks that they've faced along the way. Our peer learning network was formed of 7 organizations, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is a network and infrastructure funded by governments around the world looking at open access to data about life on Earth. MetaBrains Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organization looking at creating an open encyclopedia of music and arts metadata. The Open Apparel Registry, which is an open source data tool which maps different facilities around the world relating to garments and assigns unique IDs to each of them. So very much looking at supply chain implications there. The Open Contracting Partnership, which some of you might be aware of, which is a collaboration across government, business, civil society, and kind of technology communities to open up and transform contracting and procurement around the world. Openstreetmap Foundation, again, which will probably be a familiar name to most of you, which is an organization who aims to support and enable the development of freely reusable geospatial data, and are most well known for their Openstreetmap project. Wikimedia Foundation, again, probably a familiar name, the organization that sits above Wikipedia, with a focus on basically providing as much growth, development, and distribution of open data about everything, really. And lastly, WikiRate, which is a not-for-profit organization that looks at providing an open source registry of environmental, social, and governance data, so ESG data, about businesses, and also helps them kind of answer some of the questions around corporate impact of poor ESG data as well. The collaboration focused on 4 key topic areas. So impact of open data on people's lives, developing the right governance model for open organizations, developing a sustainable business model without compromising on commitments to open data, and making data accessible to a wide community of users as well. And I want to share some of the key learnings from the peer learning network. Please bear in mind that as most of the participants were not government organizations, the learnings might not be directly applicable to you, but I've tried to extract things in a way where I think they'll be relevant, and I've also added some links into tools and resources that you might find useful, which I can share after the session. Our first focus area was the impact of open data on people's lives and how each organization ensures that they are delivering on their mission. A number of the key learnings that came from this discussion, and I'll talk through those now. So the first one was around, if you try and start with the data, you might lose sight of the impact you're trying to create. It's worth starting at impact and working backwards. This helps to plan measurable outcomes that relate to the impact, outputs that will support these outcomes, activities that are then required to create those outputs, and the resources you need to get started. If you're trying to create impact with open data, it's likely that you're already looking at user needs, or you already have an established set of user needs in mind, which have kind of encouraged you to take that course of action. But if you don't have an audience in mind, you're probably not going to create the impact that you hope to create. So start with the audience and user needs first, especially if you're creating something new. Throwing money at problems sometimes works, but most of the time it doesn't. So the best way to deliver value is often to start small and then build from there. In the North Lanarkshire example that I cited earlier, they started with prioritizing a few data sets to publish rather than a large scale transformational change to technology or processes. If you can prove there's value in a small scale kind of pilot project at relatively low cost to the organization, that might help you to make the case for longer term investment in open data. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was talking through the data spectrum slide, open data isn't always the right answer. Quite a lot of the time, organizations end up publishing data for the sake of publishing, rather than considering whether that approach will help them to achieve longer term ambitions. So this can be problematic, obviously from the impact perspective, but also from an ethical standpoint. You should also be thinking about what data should be published in the first place and the implications that that has on people. So again, thinking about user needs and working back from impacts might help you to determine whether open data is right for a particular context. The first link on each of these tool and resources slides will be to the more detailed discussions that we had within the peer learning network on each topic. For the topic of impact, we produced a recording of the roundtable discussion we hosted at the ODI's annual summit, which is our kind of big conference that we host every year. We have a number of tools that might help around the impact area. They're all free and openly licensed, so you can go and use them, adapt them to your context, and hopefully some of these things will be useful in your work. So our logic models guidance can help you with that working backwards from impact, to help you plan more effective data initiatives. It's very simple and straightforward, so I won't talk about it in too much detail. We have a data and public services business case canvas, which helps you to consider the role of open data when creating or redesigning a service, and links to a number of tools that will help you to kind of put data at the heart of what you're planning. We also have something called the Data Ethics Canvas. It's one of our more popular tools, and some of you may be aware of it. It helps you to think about the impact that you want to create with data in a project context, and to plan how you mitigate unintended consequences of data use as well. So not just thinking about positive impact, but also how you mitigate negative impact. We encourage organizations to use this pretty much at the start of a data project and then throughout. And lastly, we have a kind of repository of case studies that we've built up over the years, including more detail on those examples I mentioned earlier. These might help you to provide, or it might help to provide some inspiration around the art of the possible, or give you some ideas about what best practice might look like in different scenarios. The next topic area was around governance, or specifically around how organizations set up to deliver impact. We learned that many organizations delivering open data initiatives rely on communities of external experts to support their mission. Sometimes this can be a formal structure, so it could be an external advisory board, for example, but sometimes this takes shape as a less structured relationship, like a critical friend style. And we'd encourage people in any organization looking to work on open data projects to identify who those experts are and try and bring them in, at least in an informal capacity, if not formal. Many of the organizations in the peer learning network operate on a global scale, and obviously the context that they work across vary wildly depending on location and audience. Having local expertise to ensure that your work addresses local challenges is key to success. Your organizations might not be operating at such a large scale, but it's still worth understanding whether you have the right people in the context to deliver the open data work in-house, or whether there are partners from a local or topic point of view that you might want to bring in. Open data communities are usually very willing to get their hands dirty. So that means if they're interested in the data or interested in a service that you're providing that uses data, open data, and they think it will be useful to their work, they may be more willing to jump in and try and help you to achieve the impact that you hope to achieve. So it's always worth engaging with those people to see whether there's a level of willingness to get involved on a volunteer basis. Obviously, funding is always going to be a concern for organizations that operate on a mission basis, but that mission focus is often a lot more powerful than leading with the kind of open data angle if you're looking at applying to various tenders. If you're looking to secure funding around open data initiatives, it's worth focusing on communicating the impact of what you're trying to create rather than talking about the data angle or leading with the data angle. The benefit of open approaches is that you're usually allowed to take what other people are doing and adapt it to suit your own needs. Try and identify pockets of good practice, particularly in the local government space. I think there's probably a lot of interesting stuff going on that's not necessarily well communicated. So it's definitely worth looking at what others are doing and then trying to pinch all of the good bits, basically. And that is the beauty of open data projects and open approaches, is that people are generally happy for you to do that. And the last thing on this area is around having a consistent understanding across the organization about what you even mean by open data, or what does openness mean to your organization. It's really important to make sure everyone is speaking the same language, and that's a real key kind of first step to ensuring success with data projects. Otherwise, it's really difficult to bring stakeholders along with you, particularly those in senior positions who have more influence over the decisions that are made. On this topic area, there's a number of tools and resources as well. The first link provides an overview to the discussions around effective organizational governance, and provide some visuals for how some of the peer learning participants have set themselves up to deliver on their missions. We produced a number of tools that help you to consider how effective your organization's data practices are and how you can improve. The Open Data Maturity Model is a guide to understanding how prepared your organization is to publish and use open data. And the Open Data Pathway tool can help you to self-assess using that methodology. For bonus points, I'd recommend you have a look at our data ethics maturity model. It's something new that we've published in the last few months, which can help you assess how well your organization considers data ethics as part of your practices around data. And if you're interested in some of the more methodology-based stuff, the Trustworthy Data Stewardship Guidebook can help you to shape some of your understanding around why trustworthiness and, by extension, data ethics are important for your organization. We've also got a data skills framework that can help you understand what balance of practical and strategic skills would be useful when it comes to working with open data in your organization. And on that point around kind of leveling the language, we have an Open Data Essentials e-learning course that can help you to make sure that everyone in the organization can relate what they're working on with data to the broader value that you're trying to create. The third topic focuses on developing a sustainable business model without compromising on commitments to open data. This is often what people cite as being the most difficult challenge when they're looking to deliver an open data initiative or project. The first point I would make here is that we try and discourage organizations from charging for access to data. And if you charge for data, it doesn't make it open anyway. But broadly speaking, I think it's far more important to think about what kind of value add services you could provide that wouldn't be detrimental to basic use of the data, that might support people to use the data. There might also be models around charging kind of organizational licenses or users as well, which you can then use to feed back into the core open data work. Quite a lot of the organizations in the peer learning network are looking at these value add service options. It's something fairly new that they're thinking about, but generally the responses they've had from users have been quite positive. So when I say users, it's more organizational users than individual users. Another point is that you can waste a lot of time, money, and effort publishing data that no one needs or is going to use. And this goes back to the user needs point. Ensuring you engage with users throughout to understand whether there's actually a demand for the data that you're planning to publish is really important, because, as I said, otherwise you can end up wasting a lot of resource. You might be collecting, managing, and publishing the data, but that doesn't mean you have to do everything. If you want to keep costs down, then try and encourage volunteers from open data communities to work with you to improve the data or service, or maybe try and incentivize them to create interesting solutions to problems through hackathon style events or something similar to that. And then lastly, linking back to the point about starting small, if you want to make an ongoing case for open data, you'll need some evidence that people are using what you publish or that open data brings value to the organization. So related to the impacts that you're trying to create, it's always worth coming up with some really kind of simple but clear KPIs to demonstrate how the work has progressed over time. Tools and resources on the sustainability point. For the actual peer learning network, we encouraged members to document their approach to sustainability using a tool we've created called the Sustainable Data Access Workbook. That's a practical set of activities for organizations to think about how they can make informed decisions about kind of revenue models around data initiatives more broadly, but it applies to open data as well. And we've also got a scaling data enabled projects checklist, which can be useful when you're designing open data projects. It helps you to think about publishing open data and open source technology, or using those things, as well as openly documenting resourcing requirements, communicating about collaboration opportunities, and sharing knowledge more widely. At first glance, the tool might not seem that beneficial, but I always say to people, if every organization working on data projects shared more of what they were doing, it would be far easier to then replicate their work and for them to replicate your work. And then the final topic focused on making data accessible to a wide community of users. The peer learning members felt that it was important to communicate not only what you're trying to do, and trying to achieve, but also what you're not trying to do, so that users are clear on how they should interact with you around the data. Many of the peer learning members had quite mixed user groups, particularly around kind of technical skill and use of data. So striking that balance between what to provide for different users can be difficult. I think an example I see a lot in both a local and a central gov context is that data analysts use data in a very different way to policymakers. But you often have to provide kind of provision for both. Otherwise, the data analyst ends up giving the policymakers the insights. So understanding the balance of the user base and how kind of data literate people are can help you make better decisions about what you provide. Creating feedback loops is always helpful. So you can collect real-time feedback from users, but also it's important to encourage people to use those or to make those as kind of obvious as possible. Otherwise, they tend not to get used. And then a final consideration is, how can you support people who aren't represented in your current user base, but you think would benefit from the data or service? Particularly think about trying to create forums that work for these groups, or finding ways for them to use the data in a meaningful way to them. Something that I would always point to here is that the digital divide between people is still a thing, and it especially has an impact on, or often has an impact on, people who are kind of reflected in the data, but might not be kind of proactively engaged with it. So it's worth thinking about those people as well. Last set of tools and resources. So we made a podcast which focuses more specifically on how the peer learning members approach community engagement. We have a tool called data ecosystem mapping, which can help you to map stakeholders, establish how data and other flows, like value flows between those different stakeholders, and then what the kind of blockers and opportunities are for using data. And this could all be applied to open data as well. I also wanted to signpost some really interesting work that we've been doing in our Data as Culture program, as I think it's an interesting example of how you can tell stories about data or with data in a lot of different forms. It doesn't have to be a kind of, traditional dashboard or something like that, right? If you're interested in kind of data inspired art and culture, then I'd recommend having a look at that. And then finally, just wanted to reference the Data Ethics Canvas again, as there's a big part of it that relates to engagement. So it's a useful tool in linking impact and engagement with the users or kind of people more broadly. That is everything for me. Hopefully I've run to time. If there's time for questions, I'm happy to take questions. If not, then obviously I'm more than happy for people to contact me. I'd love to have conversations with people about what you're working on, and if there's any of those tools that people want to use, then I'll make sure that the slides get circulated as well.
Take yourself off mute. Thanks very much, James. That's brilliant. I'll just see people, please feel free to put your hand up or put something in the chat. We've got we're just about on time, but we've always got time if there's any sort of burning questions you've got. And I've got one, but I will start with, I think, Tom, you've got a question.
Yeah, I do, and it might have been partially covered actually, but you mentioned in the presentation, James, about kind of being sensible, I suppose, about what it is that you're choosing to publish and not just publishing for the sake of it. I think that we are in a period of time where we're trying to build up our repository of data that is available to the public and peers across our network. And I don't think we've been, I think we're fairly indiscriminate about what we've published to date. I think it's spotting opportunities where something can be published and then sort of taking them, rather than necessarily having a real structured approach, because we've felt that we need to build up that level of, I suppose, engagement with open data and make sure that people are comfortable with publishing. And I guess from your perspective and an ODI perspective, is that the right approach for us to be taking? Should we start to be a bit more discerning about what we publish? Should we always be having a very clear reason why we would publish something? Yeah, so a bit of a vague question maybe, but
no, I think that's a really good question. I think it's always important to have something there, because otherwise people will go, well, there's nothing there, so why are you asking me what I care about? You're obviously not doing anything around open data anyway. I think once you've got to a point where you've got a good foundation, you have the kind of publishing platform, you have all of your processes and governance set up, and you know that people are starting to, you're kind of communicating about the platform, you're communicating about your efforts around open data, that's where you might want to start being a bit more discerning. One example that I always point to, which isn't a UK example, but some work that I did 3 or 4 years ago with the Transparency and Accountability in Public Administration and Services project in Ukraine, where they did a very similar thing, but from a central gov perspective. They published loads of data because they were like, oh yeah, everyone's really interested in us being transparent and accountable. And then they were like, oh, no one actually is using this, or we don't know how people are using this. So how can we justify all the money we've spent on doing this in the first place? So I think you will definitely get to a point where you want to start thinking about, okay, how do we capture some usage statistics, or how do we try and identify what the 3 or 4 kind of next priorities for us are, so that we make sure what we're publishing is useful and essentially we're not wasting money.
Brilliant.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, James. I think and part of the session later, I mean, we're about to hear from sort of what we've already done in Essex on open data, but I think the final part of today is a bit of, you know, what is possible. There's lots of people in here who might not have engaged with open data up to now, but they're thinking they've got ideas, and it's sort of spotting those and sort of putting those forward. But no, I'd just like to, before I hand over to Jevon, just to thank you again, James. Really good sort of context for our session today. Before we look at sort of what we've done in Essex and what we plan to do, to hear actually what's going on sort of nationally and even internationally is really useful, and it sounds like there's some really good tools for us to use there. So we'll make sure that when we send around the video for this, and we'll send around the slides as well, so people can access those links. And just for people on the call's point of view, James mentioned ethics a number of times there, and obviously it looks like some really good sort of tools there around the data ethics canvas and ethics maturity model. But just to also say, we do have our data ethics committee in Essex that we pull together sort of experts around ethics. So again, that's another resource that ECTA can provide if you want a discussion or you want to ask questions around ethics, then that is available to us all. So yes, thank you very much, James. And no further ado, I will hand over to Jevon to talk through what we've currently done on open data.
Cheers, thank you, Duncan. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully you can see it. I'll take that as a yes.
Yep, got that.
Yeah, good. Cool. So hello everyone, my name is Jevon Harper. I am a senior analyst at Essex County Council. I'm here today just to give you a quick tour of the Essex Open Data platform. So as Duncan mentioned earlier, this is a website kind of for all of Essex and all our partners. The website itself holds a wealth of information on multiple subjects, from population statistics to information about ECC services, our organisational strategies and research publications, along with information from our partners as well. It's kind of building on James's presentation. I think James' presentation was really good to show how effective data stewardship and accessibility can lead to better decision making. And with this portal, we've been working in ways to make more of kind of data about Essex accessible via openly publishing data and creating interactive tools. So really, we're looking to break down barriers, share knowledge, and help staff, organisations, and communities to use data to make better decisions, as well as stimulating innovation across Essex. So I'm here today to give you a quick demonstration of our website. I'm going to show you a number of ways in which you can access data from the platform, and a very quick guide into how you might want to contribute data to the platform yourselves. So I'm not going to go through the front page in great detail, because big spoiler, we're going to redesign this front page in the coming future. But essentially, anything you need can be found in the menu bars at the top here. I'm not going to touch on the JSNA because we have Sean Cook from our Public Health Intelligence team today, who's going to do that for us. But I'm going to demonstrate 3 kinds of resources we have on the portal. So in my day job, I am an analyst, and if people say, where can I find data on such and such, this is a really good resource for me to signpost people to. It's also a really good resource for me to find analysis data to do my own analysis from. So let's say I'm after COVID cases in Essex. So we can go on data by topic. This gives you a list of kind of all the different topics we've had in open data. Some of our uploads fall within multiple topics, but wherever you click, it should come up. So we're on the coronavirus tab, and let's look for COVID cases. And here we go. We have a tool here just showing local COVID-19 cases and deaths by district. So you'll find a bit of information here about the tool, and the tool itself can be located at the bottom here. So this is one example of the kinds of interactive tools we have on the Open Data platform. So if I click New Cases, let's select a district in a minute. So this shows you all the local COVID-19 cases in Essex, and I believe this is updated daily. So let's say we're interested in Chelmsford over the last 6 months. You can simply filter it and filter the dates at the bottom here. So this is just an example of the kinds of interactive tools we have on the platform, and things that have been very useful for us, especially during kind of the pandemic, in one, helping to communicate the number of cases in Essex, and being transparent behind the decisions we are making. So that's our COVID tracker. Let's say now we want to access a data set or something like that we want to do our own analysis with. So we can find all our data going browse datasets at the top here. And let's say we're after a spreadsheet, so we can select that in the Format tab. And let's say we're interested in youth offending, so we can go to Community Safety, and we have a data set here which is on the first time entrance into youth offending, filtered down to Essex. So again, you can click here and download the data and do whatever you need to do with it, essentially. And let's look now at another interactive tool. So I mentioned earlier that this is not just a Essex County Council resource, it's kind of for all of Essex. And Lucy's here today to kind of talk about the impact that some of the fire service incident tool we have on this on our platform has made in our organisation. So let's have a look at that. So we can see all our interactive tools by selecting View Interactive Tools at the top here. We'll simply search for fire. Now we have our fire service instance dashboard here. We'll give it a minute to think about it. It's always slow when you present, isn't it? There we go. So let's look at accidental dwelling fires, for example. So this is a wealth of information that the Essex County Fire and Rescue Service freely kind of publicly publish. And this is a tool which makes it easily accessible for kind of residents or people who aren't familiar with data to get an understanding of trends in fires throughout Essex. So again, similar to the COVID tracking tool, you can select different dates, you can select a certain district you're interested in. I can really start to filter in to find evidence of data that you need to as part of your everyday job. So that's a quick run through for the kinds of tools and resources we have on the Essex Open Data platform. Currently, we have over 200, and they're all kind of along the lines of publications, dashboards, and raw data sets. So finally, I'm just going to give you a quick guide on how to upload your own data to the Essex Open Data platform. So that's something, if that's something you're interested in the top right here, where you can see my name, normally there's a login button. You can register and essentially just get in touch with us to say, I'm interested in contributing, and we can help you out with that. In terms of guidance for uploading, if you go to About Open Data, we have some upload guidance here. And this sets out some of the guidance for and governance for uploading to the platform. So it outlines what kinds of formats you can upload, and kind of the standards we expect to go along with those uploads. So a clear and concise description, making sure everything's kind of assigned to a topic, and every data set you upload has an owner, so that someone can get in touch for further questions or for that thing to be updated. So once you have registered and you have the necessary permissions you need to upload to the website, all you need to do to add a data set is you'll see add a data set under your name. So in true Blue Peter fashion, here is one I made earlier, imaginatively called test. So all you have to do is basically fill in the boxes. So a title accurately describes what you're uploading. The team, so again, we have many different teams here, some of which will be outside of Essex County Council. And different mastheads. So if you are from an external partner organisation, you can have your own logo to go with your upload. A full description, just saying this is the kind of data it is, these are the time periods it's from, blah, blah, blah. That sort of stuff is kind of things we expect from description. And just tags to help people search for things, essentially, is what we're looking for. You can assign it to one of our topics here. And anything you upload obviously should be sensible to be shared openly. I actually have Tom Mcgregor next, who's after me, to talk through the kinds of things that are shareable on open data platforms. And a contact as well with every upload you do. So once you've done all that, your page will be created, and it's as easy as just clicking add files, and you can drag and drop all your uploads here. So I've uploaded a test CSV there, for example. And that's it from me really today. So that's a very, very quick tour of our website. It shows you the kinds of tools and resources we have and how you can contribute to the platform yourselves. If you do have any feedback, you can talk to us today. We'll give you our email addresses, but we do have a feedback form on our website here under About Open Data. We do also have an email address, open.data@essex.gov.uk, which we can share after this session. So that's it from me today, unless there's any questions.
Just if any hands go up, Javon, but no, thanks for that, showing us sort of what's on there already, and I guess how to upload. Hopefully people, when they sort of heard James's presentation, will see Lucy later about the benefits for their organisation of putting stuff on there. If people are interested, obviously they can talk to the team, Javon and the team about how they go about that. If there's no hands going up right now, I think I'm handing to Tom. Is that right, Javon? Tom Mcgregor?
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
and
there's just a quick question from Stephen about your future of our Essex Open Data portal. So yeah, we're hoping to make it a bit more interactive with kind of more partners contributing data to the platform. So we really, I guess our ambition is for this to be kind of a one-stop shop for data about Essex. So in the course of jobs, if you need to find any evidence about Essex, this is kind of the first place you think of. So I guess that's our ambition, really. Cheers.
Perfect. Thanks, Javon. Over to you, Tom.
Cool. Thank you both. My name is Tom Mcgregor. I'm a Senior Information Governance Officer here at Essex County Council. So if I do have one slide for you, if I share that, even if it's just so you don't have to stare at me for the whole time I'm talking. So in regards to information governance, there are two key questions that we need to be able to answer. Can we use the information, and have we ensured the data is free from personal identifiers or anything that otherwise allows an individual to be identified when used with other data? So the first one, can we use the information in the first place? We need to ensure that we comply with the data protection principles and individual rights. As part of individual rights, this includes that they have the right to be informed, and this is generally done through our privacy notices. For ECC, they're available on our council website. If you're not with ECC, I'd advise checking with your local IG team or checking on your organisation's homepage. You'll usually be able to find them on there. So here, every service area privacy notice on the ECC website says that we will use the information that we collect for service improvement and for research. However, the research will be in anonymised form unless we ask for consent to use personal information for this purpose. So regardless of who you work for, if the information is anonymised, then it's fine. There's no IG considerations. Now, the UK's data protection regulators, the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, have also produced a code of practice for anonymisation, which you may find useful. I will put the link to that in the chat when I finished, I'd say it's definitely worth having a go through if you get the time. If the information is not anonymized, do we have consent from the individual to use their information? And this includes if we're using it in a pseudonymized format. If we require consent, this is something we probably want to be looking at acquiring at collection rather than going back later on to ask them, as that can throw up all sorts of issues. If it involves personal information that is anything other than anonymized data, you'll need to complete a data privacy impact assessment to assess the risks of what you're trying to do. And this can be completed in collaboration with your IG team. There is an information governance session planned for the future where we'll go through that sort of thing in a bit more detail. So we've done our checks. We know that we can use the information. Now we need to ensure that the data is free from personal identifiers. So to start with, what do we understand by the term personal information? So personal data is anything that could be used to identify someone. This isn't just a person's name. If you think about a neighbour who lives down the road to you, you may not know their name, but you'd be able to describe them to anybody else on your street or to anybody who needed to know. And they'd probably know who you were talking about. If you were talking to another neighbour, they might have a different relationship to you with that person, and they'll be able to fill in the blanks that you didn't have. Now, all of a sudden, you've combined your information with somebody else's and they're fully identifiable. And this is the same sort of thing that can happen potentially with information that we're sharing online. By ensuring the data we use is truly anonymized and aggregating certain information, so using things like age ranges instead of specific ages, a first half of postcodes instead of full addresses, these sort of things are able to help us to prevent individuals from being identified. So questions we need to consider include, based on what I just went through about personal information, is there anything left in the data sets we're using that can be personally identifiable? Is there anything else publicly available that can be connected to the data that would make it identifiable? Are low numbers going to be an issue? So for example, if we're going through something and it's how many blue houses are on a street and there's only one, it's not personally identifiable somebody, that's not personal information. But if it's one person on a particular street was a victim of domestic abuse, that is personal information. And there may be other stuff out there that this can be combined with for where the individual can be identified. So do we need to make it more high level, making it about all the people in a certain region in Essex, as sort of Jevon showed us on some of the examples? So that is a really vague example, but just for illustrative purposes, so we sort of understand what we mean by low numbers, and so that it's in your mind sort of going forwards when interrogating your data. So to confirm, if the data is anonymized, information governance won't have an interest. But remember, if you're unsure, you want advice and guidance, check with your IG resource. Business information may not be subject to IG concerns. A lot of this may be made available through freedom of information requests anyway, but there may be reputational risk to the organisation that you may wish to consider before using it. At ECC, we are fortunate to have quite a large IG team compared to other sort of maybe local authorities or organisations. And data analytics here have a dedicated IG resource in myself, but if you do have any questions, if you're not sure, always make sure you go to them for advice and guidance. And now, certainly speaking for myself, I'm always happy to help. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, Duncan, I'll hand back to you.
Okay, thanks. So just while I wait and see if there's any hands, just say as Tom trailed there, I think we've got one of these sessions in next month, which will be a bit more sort of on IG specifically, so look out for the invite to that. But no, that was helpful, Tom, in terms of people thinking about what they can upload to open data, thinking about the IG implications, really useful. So thank you very much for that. So I'm trying to open up the chat. See. Yeah. Sorry, kind of a meeting starting, I'm not going to. So I think we're now going to Sean, and Jevon mentioned it when he was doing his demonstration. There's a part of the Open Data platform which is around our JSNA information, and I think, Sean, you're going to sort of show us all what the content is there. Over to you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Duncan. So I'm just going to share my screen. So I've got some slides that just break down how we've structured the JSNA this time around, and then we'll go on to a demo on the Open Data platform. So This time round for the JSNA, we developed it to consider kind of the wider determinants of health using the Robert Wood Johnson model. And on the Open Data platform, there's kind of a good 1 to 2 minute video linked there that kind of goes in a little bit more detail about that model if people are interested. So this model is kind of concerned with our overall health and the quality of life that we enjoy in Essex, and our behaviours and lifestyles that impact on our health, our access to healthcare and the quality of the healthcare available to us, those wider socioeconomic factors that influence our health, and the aspects of the physical environment around us that impact on our health as well. So this time around, rather than like a single standalone report, the JSNA is comprising of a set of interactive reports in dashboard form, as well as some more like detailed slide packs that have got a bit of analysis around those topics. So just a quick look at those breakdown topics there. We've got social and economic factors. So we've got it broken down by employment, digital inclusion, education, income, and crime and community safety. We've got the physical environment, which includes housing and transit, air quality, green infrastructure, and civic assets. For clinical care, we've got 5 slide packs that are preventing premature and avoidable mortality, ensuring a positive experience of care, preventing and helping people to recover from ill health or injury, supporting people with long-term health conditions, and access to care and the healthcare workforce. For health behaviours, we've got diet and exercise, tobacco use, sexual health, and drug and alcohol use ones. And finally, for health outcomes, we've got sections around mental health, kind of encompassing all the prevalence, protective and risk factors. And then for length and quality of life, that looks at a bit of life expectancy and mortality, as well as some other conditions and their prevalences. So what I'll do now is I'll head over to the Open Data platform. As Jevon showed, this is what the homepage looks like, and at the top here we've got a section for the JSNA. So we've got four pages to go to, and this is the first page that's kind of the landing page for us. We've got a high-level summary for those topics here. So if we click on this, we're able to download a slide pack, which, as I say, has a more overarching look at those topics in more general form. So that might be helpful for, say, a higher level look. And then we've got the 3 other pages here. So in the About the JSNA section, it kind of says who uses the JSNA, what it's kind of for, and who is involved in producing it. So we had some workshops at the beginning of the process to talk to stakeholders and see what it was that they would find most important in a JSNA, so we could include them. And we've also got one for the structure of the JSNA, and this is where we've got that link I mentioned, which goes through the Robert Wood Johnson model a little bit more in depth, and breaks down, as I've kind of shown in the slides previously, how we have structured the JSNA this time around. But the most important one to demo today, we've got the Explore the Data section, which has the 5 topics that I mentioned there, as well as a page for kind of cross-cutting resources that will be continually uploading more information to that, which kind of links more with the JSNA. So we've got a report on there for the indices of multiple deprivation, as well as a few more that will be coming in the coming weeks. So if I have a look at the reports, so we've got a report section which will have all the slides related to that topic there. So if you click the mental health one, you'll have the option of opening up that PowerPoint, and to save the delay of doing that, I've opened it already here. So generally the slide packs will look very similar. They'll have the opening page and then a bit about what is in that report, followed by a contents page, and then the broken down sections for each of the reports will have a title page there. So looking at the prevalence and incidence, if we look at this one as a general default slide, we've got the measure name at the top here, and then in the top right we've got a bar graph that shows the latest data available at the time of producing it, with the most easy to compare areas. So for this one, we don't have it at district level or CCG level, so we're comparing Essex, Southend and Thurrock with England, the region, and the Eastern region areas. In the bottom right, we've got a that measure over the time series. So all of the data we've got available is shown in the bottom right there. And then for ease of interpreting the data, we've got a little bit of analysis which kind of shows what you're seeing in the data on the right. And then in the bottom left, we've got a little bit of background about that measure, a bit about like kind of literature around that and what that measure kind of means and how it impacts on people's health. So now if I come out of that, say generally all the slide packs will look very similar. Some people will have the literature in a separate section down the bottom, or it could be woven in throughout that slide deck for that topic area. And if we go back to these pages here, we've got the one to click to view the dashboards. And if we use the length and quality of life dashboard here as the example, say when you're sharing your screen, everything loads a little bit slower, but we've got the contents page. There's a few different options that we've got for the contents pages. I'll show this one here. This is like the standard default one, which just has buttons to be able to click through to that measure, as I'll do here. It'll take us to the life expectancy at birth measure and that page. And I'll showcase the other options, which have a little bit more of a grouping stage to try and narrow down the amount of pages that we need down the bottom. So at the top of this one, we've got the measure name, so life expectancy at birth, and then in the bottom here, you've got what the definition is for that. So what I'll say is that the majority of the data we have available is provided from OHID using their tool Fingertips, but we've pulled it together into an easier to use dashboard to make it easier for stakeholders to use for Essex purposes, and kind of looking a bit more in an easier to read format, I think, than Fingertips to compare those areas in a faster way than clicking through a lot more filters on OHID's dashboards. So at the top of the page here, we've got the whole page filters. So it means that all these filters at the top will impact everything on this page here. So where we've got a geography, we've got the areas that we considered under the JSNA focus. So that'll be the lowest level we went to was district. And for ones that didn't have district level data available, we were using CCG level data. So with that selected, it will include all the JSNA focus areas that we have available for that measure. If we click off of that, you'll see that it's included all the data available there from Fingertips. I will say, to make sure that it was a more efficient dashboard to run, we removed things at like GP level. Anything below district level we took out, so that data is still available online through OHID's webpage, but for us that kind of low level data wasn't necessary for our JSNA. So if I click back onto the JSNA focus, again, it brings through those district areas, and you'll notice what it didn't do when I clicked off of that. It didn't impact on this one here. That's because this visual is already impacted by this other filter here, which we've got a few areas selected that were important for Essex. So if we click back onto the JSNA focus, in this left-hand side here, we can do the single year select data. And we look down and we can change this to 2007 to 2009. That will impact on this bar graph here, but does not impact on the time series graph. And vice versa, if we press Control and click Ashford, you'll see that it won't come through on this page here, and that's because this filter up here impacts on this visual here. So if we deselect the JSNA focus area, you'll see that Ashford has come through on that. And again, we can hold Control and select to include other areas as necessary. I'll move on to another dashboard in a second, but just to say that if you want to head back to the contents page, we've got the button at the top here that will revert you back to the contents page, so you can easily find your way through to the relevant page that you're looking for. So if I head back and look at one of our clinical care dashboards, you'll see that the contents page is structured slightly differently. And as I said, that's to kind of group some measures together, so we didn't end up with kind of 50 pages down the bottom for everyone to scroll through. It works the same way. So if I click on the diabetes button, it will pull up this page, that we can see at the top here slightly different. We've got a measure filter. So that means that you can click through to the different measures related to the diabetes topic, and it will impact all of the visuals down the bottom here. So everything on this one works the same way, except we've got the measure filter included. And what you can find is, because of the way data is structured, if I click from estimated diabetes diagnosis rate to this one here, it will remove the data from this bar graph here. So it's kind of one of the snags that we've come across, that is just a problem with including lots of data into one dashboard. And for this topic, there was lots of data available, unfortunately. So what you can do is, if something disappears, it's generally because of a filter is impacting it in a way that means that data isn't there. So if you click on the select a year filter, you can see that there's no data available for 2018 as it's written there, but we have 2019 to 20 year, and you click on that and that data will appear. What I will say is the reason we've made these dashboards kind of interactive to be able to get the latest data and publish them in this way is to enable data colleagues and people across all the districts, means that they can export that data and do their own analysis. So I know people like to produce their own kind of district level profiles and compare to areas that they find most relevant to them based on size, geographically or population size. We are working with TS to get a functionality enabled so we can export that data. But when that is in place, you'll be able to hover over the filter, the visual, and click the three dots in the top right of that filter, and you'll be able to export the data. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly show a little bit of the back end of how we included the data into these dashboards, as I know there's colleagues on here that are more data focused. So just to say that when it is available, you'll be able to click the three dots and you'll be able to export the data, and you'll be able to grab that data in CSV format and do your own analysis. So what we did, we used, say, fingertips produced by Oudit, and we used an API, which is at the top here, to include all the measures. What I will say is, I think there's more efficient ways to pull in APIs in a grouped way. We did them as we went along through the JSNA process. So we produced our slide packs first. So as we did them, we included them in the dashboard to try and cut down the time needed to do the dashboards at the end. And what we did from here is we included extra columns to enable us to filter. So for the JSNA focus areas, the geography type filter, and to include the colours, we included a separate table here, which we're able to link through in the relationship section of Power BI to be able to filter, say, for the JSNA focus and the geography type. And we did a similar thing with the metadata, which meant that we were able to include the definitions on each page. And then for the bar graphs, that meant we were able to conditionally format to include the correct colours for the areas. So in the visual section, we were able to format a style by field value and use geography colour, which was the name of the column, to make sure that all our districts in Essex and the CCGs had the pink that we'd selected, and that Southend and Thurrock had their individual colours produced. Now, I think that's everything I need to go through, so I'm happy to take questions.
Great, thanks, Sean. People, if you want to put your hands up, there's one from David. It's asking for your stuff when you mentioned fingertips. Sean, do you use the API from fingertips to pull the data through, as a question?
Yes, yeah, I did. So just kind of demoed that at the end there, that we used their API functionality to bring in the data.
Right, thank you. Tom, I can see your hand up, I think.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, it's more of a comment. And it's that I think this is really exciting that the JSNA is available in this way. I think we get through a report on what our most viewed pages are on the Open Data platform. And with the exception of hot topic issues like the COVID reporting and things like that, JSNA has historically been, even just a static version, has been in our top 2 or 3 most viewed pages every week, or nearly every week, for the entirety of the time it's been on the platform. So it's clearly something that is really well engaged with by partners, by the public, by people within our teams. And I think it's really important that we shine a proper light on this, because this is really good. This is really exciting that this is all available in such a broken down way that enables people to actually use it effectively. And I've already heard from other people in other councils and people who have their JSNAs published in a similar way, how it really enables people to gather sort of intelligence that they maybe would have had to go and request elsewhere previously, and maybe make a request to teams like your own, Sean. So I think this is really important that people get to grips with what's included on the platform around the JSNA, because I think it will really help a lot of people with evidence for funding bids, for strategies, for all sorts of different things. And yeah, it's really something that I think to be celebrated that it's on there. So I think big well done to you and the team, and to Jevon, who I know worked with you guys. But hopefully this is really exciting for everyone else too.
I'll come in on that excitement in a moment, Tom, but I'm just going to, David, you had your hand up as well as your question in the chat. Did you want to come in?
Yes, hello. Yeah, I've just got a question about, because we're thinking about using Power BI to kind of display data, not JSNA, but more like local data. And the one question that was asked to me was about how do you deal with people with accessibility issues? I know there was some stuff about screen readers can use Power BI, but I think, have you kind of implemented some stuff for that in the JSNA?
So for the interactive dashboards, I know it was looked into by one of our colleagues, I think mainly for the slide packs. But yeah, I think that's definitely something. I think to say that this is kind of will be a continuous iterative process, really, that we're always going to try to look to improve things. So I think that's definitely something that was on our list to do. I would say I think one of the lessons learned is to definitely allow time to format, particularly the dashboards, because once you make one change to one page, you've got to make it to all of them, and that's not the quickest thing to do. And to allow time for more learning on how to use the program, as I know even myself and a few other colleagues hadn't used it in the way that we've done it before. It's a large program similar to Excel that you think you know how to use it, and something will crop up which throws a spanner in the works that you need to learn to do. So yeah, I think that would be something that we look to do in the future. So not something I can help with in terms of giving you the answers now, unfortunately. Sorry, David.
Tom, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that as well and say that we have at ECC, we've got like best practice guides around what you can publish, how you can publish from a user accessibility point of view. There is I don't know if it's an accessibility policy, but it's certainly like guidance around it. And we have like user design and UX colleagues who we've engaged with at different points around the open data platform. I think the big thing that we are constantly advised about with accessibility is PDFs are not good practice. I think other interactive tools I think they've probably all got limitations, right? I think there's things that we should be considering when we're building these for different people's needs. But broadly speaking, we've not been advised to not use Power BI for accessibility reasons. That said, I am 100% sure there will be some people who will find it difficult to engage with. And I think one of the real good principles about open data that we all need to follow, and I think we could follow better and build on this, is to make data accessible in different ways. So I think it's important that we have these accessible, like these dashboards that are interactive to people. But it's also important that we have the PDFs alongside, the PowerPoints alongside it. I think it's important that we have the drill down functionality so people are able to extract CSV files from the data sets as well. If we're able to do that, then you sort of have like a multi-pronged approach to make sure that the data is available. So I think, yeah, hopefully that sort of part answers the question, David.
No, that's all right. I mean, it's just a question that was asked to me about making accessible. So I just wondered if you had kind of implemented that or not. But yeah, thanks.
Okay, before we move on to our last speaker, Richard, did you have a question?
Thanks. Yeah, it was about the balance between interactive tools and sort of PowerPoint presentations and things like that. So in Southend, we moved to a pretty much digital only JSNA product about 3 or 4 years ago, but just recently we've had a bit of pushback to sort of ask for more slide packs and things like that, because people like to be able to print and have something easily accessible. Just wonder if you've had any similar challenges.
I think from the original workshop conversations with stakeholders, I think people were very keen to continue to have the data available in a slide pack form with the analysis available for them. I think it's just it gives them the easier opportunity to kind of pick up and go. Whereas potentially the interactive dashboards can help people, like in a meeting, if they're called up on some data, they'll be able to find it quickly. But we definitely had feedback that they're very keen to still continue to have those slide packs available.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Sean, for that demonstration of the JSNA tool on there. I think just echoing Tom's point, probably quite sadly, I'm equally excited by it, but also a bit sad because I'm feeling old, because I think it's probably the best and most accessible JSNA I've seen in Essex, and someone who probably about 12 or 13 years ago had to write the JSNA for Essex, and I think it took me about 100 pages of a Word document to write, and I'm sure lots of people read it. So to see it in this format, that it really makes it accessible for analysts and commissioners and other users is really exciting. So thanks for that. And I'm just going to hand over to Lucy. I can see on my screen. Hi, Lucy. So Lucy's just going to give us a bit of sort of update in terms of how the fire service has used Open Data Platform and what that's meant for them as an organisation. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you very much. I've got a presentation, so I'll just get that shared on the screen, and hopefully, bear with me one moment. So it's coming through. Brilliant. Hopefully everyone can see that on the screen. So yeah, I wanted to take the opportunity today to talk to you about the impact of the Open Data Platform and our journey in terms of data in Essex Fire in general. So I think it was about probably just over 12 months ago last time a presentation took place about our Open Data Platform. But I'm going to take you back to the actual very beginning. And I was trying to think back about when we started having the first conversations with ECC and ECTA about data and sharing and what we could do. And this is back in February, the 12th of February 2020. At that moment in time, I had a really small team in terms of the data team in Essex Fire. So there was myself, there was Leanne, who was my performance analyst, and Ben, who sort of ran our data system at that time. Ben had actually handed his notice in, so my team was getting reduced by a third. We took the opportunity to meet with Tom and the wider team up at Essex and spent the day with them to talk about kind of like our journey so far, what we wanted to do and what we wanted to achieve. And some of the things that we had at the time we talked about. We had a really old and slow system internally that we used to access our data. None of our data was shared within our organisation was live. We weren't great at using data from our partners and also how we shared our data was pretty old school as well. So it was quite hidden within our website and we shared it within a CSV file. And a lot of our talking as well about that day was about the people that are at harm to the fire service in terms of fires and accidents that we attend. We're also at harm across the wider sector within Essex as well. And we knew that if we could share our data better, we would be able to get to more people. So we walked away from that meeting really, really excited. And I think we were planning to meet a month later to take the next steps. Obviously, you can tell February the 12th, a month later, we started to hit pandemic time. And I think probably all of us data people around Essex were caught up with providing information to our senior leaders about the impact of the pandemic. So we actually met again November 2020. So that phrase, the pandemic had become the new normal. So in terms of Essex Fire, the need and want for our data had grown at an exponential rate. We're still on our old system. We were still showing our data in arrears, but we started, instead of showing it a month in arrears, some of our key data we were showing weekly. It was a particularly manual process itself. I was getting up at 6 a.m. in the morning to produce the data on a Friday to be able to give to our senior leaders for 9 o'clock in terms of the meetings that they needed to have with the PFCC. The member of staff had left. I had literally just replaced that person, so I had a new member of staff. And we also had a very hard deadline within the organisation to replace our reporting tool. But we were still a really, really small team. We had our day-to-day work that we needed to do. We had requirements in terms of doing analysis for the organisation, but we were constantly getting bombarded for freedom of information requests. So when we met with Tom, and Tom in particular was wanting to get our data onto the open platform. So we knew that we wanted to show our data better. We'd seen a tool that London Fire had published to show their data. Ultimately, we wanted our data to look better than their data and the tool to be better and a lot more interactive. But we also wanted to be able to tell the story of our data, because we thought if we showed people the data and we were able to articulate it in the way that we wanted instead of CSV files, we'd probably be able to reduce the amount of requests that we were coming in to the team, and we'd be able to put more of the focus on adding the value to our organisation. So we published the Open Data tool. It was, it's a relatively quick turnaround. I think production started of it in January 21, and it was published by sort of the end of March, beginning of April 2021. It was a really, really popular tool when we launched it, and I think we've done a demo before, so I won't take you through the tool. But what it allowed us to do was allowed people to dive into the areas that they were interested in. So with our CSPs and our partnerships, we were able to focus on the individual areas that they were talking about. They could see fires, they could see special services, they could see injuries and fatalities, they could see the causes of the fires. We hoped it would reduce our workload. It probably unintentionally increased our workload, but the actual questions we were getting both internally and externally were much more intelligent that we were getting. So instead of, can you tell me the number of this that we've had in that area, we were getting, oh, we've seen that this has happened. Can you tell us a bit more about this, or what can we do and what next? It did reduce some of our calls, so we were not needing to provide this information to our senior leaders as often, because we could signpost them straight to the dashboard. One of the best things that we come out of this was the partnership working and sort of like the shared learning that we had within ECC and ECFRS. So following on from this, we had a want to produce no partnership works and looking at accidental dwelling fires, and it was one of the new intelligent questions that come out of our accidental dwelling fire, that come out of the Open Data dashboard, was how can we target our resources to those people that are most at harm in Essex. And it allowed us to actually turn our insight into action. So working closely with ECC, we are now able to understand those individuals more at risk for accidental dwelling fires, their risk profile, and most importantly, where those people are. In addition to this, we're able to provide target-based interventions for the future to those at our community at greater risk. Interestingly, we know that 10% of all of our dwelling fires that occurred between 2017 and 2021 occurred in just 7 wards within Essex. So it allows us to focus our resources. And the work has allowed us to compare our previous analysis risk profiles, who we worked up with at Essex University, and our understanding of those profiles is much greater. And by joining our data sets from Essex Fire, from social care, from Experian, the indices of multiple deprivation, we have found that many cases that we're dealing with, they are the same people with the same issues and same risk profiles. This is where we need to be as a fire service. We need to be using this, and we need to be using it much wider. I'm just going to show another picture. It's a photo that I've taken this morning. One of the things that's grown out of using the tool for the accidental dwelling fires, we actually have a risk room in Essex Fire now, and this is specifically around our home fire risk. And I've not taken the picture of the wall that actually has the dashboards printed out on it. Yeah, it's a bit old school, it's a bit paper, and it's not interactive, but actually it is. It's allowing people to go in and look at the risk and look at where we're targeting the risk. So we have sort of like on the second picture on that page, we have all of our areas and the number of visits that our fire stations are undertaking in order to target the risk in those areas. We understand our resources and where we're going to produce those risks, and it's a really inspiring room to go into to understand how we're using our data and how we're using it to drive forward. Also, at the same time that this is going on, my actual team as well, we replaced our our reporting platform. So we like a nice name. So our new reporting platform was NERF. It's the new reporting framework. And we've rolled out to date 13 apps across the service, which contain about 20 dashboards. Our team is still a very, very small team, but we are the appetite for data and the want for data has grown dramatically within those. So the dashboards have got many, many pages, and we can give people up to date. So we're updating our dashboards twice a day now, and we're getting more and more intelligent questions, and the questions in terms of the data are growing, and the want and the need for it. On a national scale as well, oh, sorry, I've got another slide on here before we could move on to that. We're also growing our Power BI knowledge within the team. So we're starting to use Charticulator in order to create our own visuals, and we're starting to do more about data science, and that is our step going forward. So we've started using the sentiment scoring in terms of our debrief tool, so we know that the debriefs that we're using, that we're undertaking, are adding value. And we've also, you know, hot off the press, we've created our first predictive time series model to look into our call volumes into our control room, so we can understand the ebbs and flows of those call volumes and stuff. But what we're moving into next is the interesting bit, and it moves us back to our open data. So off the back of the inspection, so every fire service within England was inspected, and we've all been inspected at least twice now under Her Majesty's Inspectorate. And they understood when they went round that we couldn't measure every fire service the same as easy as we could, because everyone had a different standard that they're working towards. And one of the fire standards that they've come up with a list of fire standards. One of them is a data fire standard about this is the baseline across every fire service that we need to be working to. That includes data literacy, includes the sharing of data and publication. And there's also another fire standard that looks at our community risk management plan. And the idea of this is that we, as in the fire sector, need to understand the risk to our communities much greater. We need to use data to inform the data. And this is where this guy comes into. So we have a project coming up called our Prometheus Project. So for those that don't know, Prometheus is a Titan god of fire, and he's best known for defying the gods by stealing fire from them and giving it to humanity in the form of technology, knowledge, and generally civilization. And in some versions of the myth, he's credited with the creation of humanity from clay. Prometheus is known for his intelligence and been a champion of humankind, and is also seen as the author of human arts and science. So we've called our project that. To be honest, quite a lot of people just call it back to me as the Greek God Project. But the idea is that we're going to take as much data as we can using open data. If we can use our partners, more sensitive data, to pull in as much information as we can as possible about our communities, to pull it all together so we can generate an individual risk score for each of our premises in each of our locations within the county, so we can target our resources in the most appropriate way for them, using the best way possible to intervene them. So we go to less incidents ultimately. You know, we want to prevent them before they occur. And so I suppose it's more of a call to arms to everyone in the room and to the services that you are representing is, you know, tell us what data will help us understand the harm. We know that the people that are at harm for fire are also at harm for other areas across the county, and we probably all have a little bit of that data. So in order to be able to pull that together and to get those individual risk scores will really take us forward in terms of the fire service. And we want to be, you know, we want to be at the forefront in terms of the fire service, and we want Essex to be the one that's standing up in front of the others and saying, this is what we've done and this is how we've worked with our partners and our open data in order to achieve that. That's the end of my presentation. I think I probably rattled through it quite quickly, but I'm happy to take questions, to have a discussion, or just to take emails from people if you want to tell me what data you've got. But I'll stop screen sharing now. No?
Brilliant, thanks, Lucy. It's great to as well as the benefits of open data, good to always get a bit of a Greek mythology as well. So every day is a school day. But no, I mean the benefits there. Obviously, you know, the one I particularly hit home, not only helping with people who've like for FOIs, but the one that hit home for me is people within your organisation asking you better questions, and that's what we're always after that, aren't we, in terms of, you know, the sort of questions we're getting from heads of service, directors, commissioners. So if we can improve the questions they're asking of us, and if that is an outcome of you having this, then that's, you know, for me, a really powerful one. Well, I'll just see if there's any other questions. Tom, put your hand up.
Again, not so much of a question or comments, and I'm sorry everyone, I know I never shut up in these things, but I think that this is a really great example of what open data can do for us as organizations. When we go and talk to people, a lot of the time one of the blockers is like, well, why should we invest time in working with you? Why should we be using open data? How does it help us? Because everyone's so busy. And I think what we see in the example that you just spoke through, Lucy, is that you start off with a really small team with limited capacity, but kind of go out of your way to try and do something a bit different. And obviously we worked with you on that, and it's led to quite a lot of action since. And I think that's something that we can all learn from. I think, like, if we see, like, firstly, if we put ourselves out there, then we can, like, benefit, right? We can keep learning, we can kind of find new opportunities and stuff. But specifically with open data, I think it gives us a really good test bed of what we can all do, what we can get from open data. So if you are in an organization that has much smaller analytical resource, speak to us, speak to Lucy, speak to anyone who's, like, spoken today, because I think we benefit from having an open data platform that has fire service data on it. I think we benefit from starting to build up partnerships with the fire service at a strategic level that weren't really there before, I think it's fair to say. And I think we benefit from getting involved in projects with other organizations too. So if you're sort of someone in the room who works for a really tiny organization or doesn't have much in the way of analytical capacity, do speak to us, because there's a good chance that there's something that we could do together that helps us to advance open data, to advance the strategic relationships between our organization, and can sort of help other organizations go on similar journeys to the one that the fire service have been on. So it's great to hear, and it's great to hear about, like, the continued work that you're all doing. But yeah, thank you for sharing, Lucy.
Yeah, no, it was quite nice pulling together the presentation, actually, to think about. Obviously, Tom, you saw us almost 2 years ago now, of how far forward we are in terms of that, and a lot of that is being able to reinvest our resources within our team. So, you know, it's, you know, the ultimate secret aim for publishing and automating our data was so that we could all go off on holiday at the same time and drink cocktails, and we haven't been able to do that. We've just generated more work. We've been able to but we've reinvested our time and resources and just pushing ourselves further forward. And I think all of this work has just built the trust from the organisation and from our senior leaders to let us do what we need to do to get to where they need us to be. And you know we have a fair amount of freedom, and you know that's come from partnership working and from learning and from sharing that. But no, I really would recommend people to get in touch with the team, because it's always nice to talk data with like-minded people, if nothing else.
Exactly. No, thank you, Lucy. And as I say, that's what sort of these sort of big part equation networks and events and us talking between meetings is all about, really. So it's great. So hopefully we're getting to near the end, and hopefully I'll finish by 1:45. So we've got 10 minutes. If people just sort of bear with us a bit longer, because we were going to have breakout rooms. We're going to try something a bit different. And my colleague Emma, if you want to call Emma, I think you were going to try and put up a question that people could feed into all at the same time. Is that right? We've got technology to do that. Sorry, go on.
Yes, we've got a series of 4 questions.
Right.
So I'll be launching an individual poll for each question. The answers are anonymous if it bothers anyone. So yeah, feel free to it should come up in the middle of your screen if anyone hasn't done this before, and just put in as many responses as you like. And then when we move on to the next one, I'll close it so we're not getting confused between the 2 polls. So I'll launch the first one. Hopefully everyone will see it come up now. Okay, has that gone live? Can everyone see that?
Yeah, we've got that. So you're asking people what kind of things would they like to see on their data platform. So so it might be things that are on there but they've not seen them yet, but what sort of things would people like to see? Okay, let's spend just a minute or so putting that in.
Oh, it's getting quite small, but I don't actually know how to make it bigger, so apologies everyone.
We can capture it, can't we? I think we can. We once you've got this, Emma, we've got this, haven't we, to capture what people are saying.
Yeah, I'll export this data and yeah, we can share it.
Okay, just a couple more seconds on that one, and then Emma can move us on. So I think because everyone's writing the word data at the end of their topic, data will be the biggest, but it's fine. Health data seems to be quite large, so yeah. I think obviously Sean showed that we have got some health data on in JSNA resource, but perhaps that's something that we want to look at in terms of an area to expand into. Hospital data, yeah, some environmental stuff. Okay, I think it stopped moving a bit. So, did you want to? Oh, we had 53 responses. Thanks, everyone. Do you want to close that one and submit the next one, Emma?
Yep. Okay. Close poll. Hopefully, it should disappear from everyone's screen. And I will launch the next question.
Okay. So we're asking people if they've got data. Is that correct? I mean, for their organisation that they might want to think about putting on the open data platform.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. I thought that's the answer, isn't it? Yeah, have you got some? Yes. Ambulance data, yeah, would be really interesting actually. Yeah, population health data, yeah. This is really useful, thanks guys. I think the team that are working on open data really, as I say, as everyone said, really looking over the sort of next 6 months to make sure that the things we're putting on there are things that people are going to find useful and want to do for, you know, for everyone to use, but also for your particular organisation. So really useful to see the type of stuff that you might want to share on there. Okay, a couple more seconds, and then Emma, whenever you're ready, you want to share the third question?
Yep, no worries. Okay, launching the next one, which is what data do you have available that you'd like to dig into or share to gain more understanding of an issue? So I've just launched that one.
So I guess, I don't know, Jeb, when you answer that, is this really about sort of like the example we had from the fire service there in terms of data that they had but they wanted to look at, dig down to it in a bit more detail, and sort of working in partnership help them do that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the gist. So
Yeah. Okay.
If you have data you feel could be that could be powerful if you join it to other organizations' data, or if you were to publish it, I suppose, what could that lead to?
Thank you.
Okay, should we close this one? Yep.
2 more minutes before I'd like to let everyone go and have a bit of time before their 3 o'clock meeting. So if you share the last question, that'd be great. Thanks, Emma.
Okay. My internet is being incredibly slow, so that's why it's taken a while from when I'm saying, oh, I've launched it, to actually appear. So apologies, everyone. That should be closed. Hang on, sorry.
So people can start to think about it. Do you want to read out what the last one will be before it appears?
Yep, the last one is, the question is going to be, oh, sorry, hang on, the drop-down screen is hiding it. Can you identify partners that might have data on shared issues? So I'm just launching this one now.
Yeah, thanks, Emma.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. So actually different tiers of local government appearing there. So parish councils and district councils, NHS, police, DWP, voluntary sector. Yeah, very good point. Okay, while you're just submitting your last couple there, and I say the team will collect these up. It'll be really for them to sort of investigate, talking to which partners about what next for open data. I'll just close while you're sort of finishing doing that, really. So I just want to say thanks again, everyone, for spending the time on the Be Part Equation event. Hopefully you found it as useful as I did. I think really interesting topic. Obviously heard from James about what open data is and some of the tools available at a national level for us. Obviously heard from sort of Jevon in terms of what we've currently done in Essex and where we are on that journey, the IG implications of what we should be considering if we're considering putting stuff on there from Tom. Sean obviously shared with us what's in JSNA, and then we heard from Lucy in the fire service in terms of the benefits of them using the open data platform. So hoping that has inspired you to think, actually, we could use this within our organisation. So please take Jevon's offer and get in touch in terms of anything you want to talk through. Even if you've got an idea about, well, might want to do something, make that connection. That's what this network's all about, making those connections to make things happen. So please get in touch about that. I will just quickly trail next couple of sessions will be part of the equation. So as Tom trailed earlier, we're going to do something particularly on IG coming up, and we've got something really interesting from our data ethics committee. We want to talk to you about data ethics and how that can help you in your work and your conversations with your customers. So those are coming up, but again, as always, if there are topics that you want to put forward or you want to present, please get in touch with me, and we will put you on the agenda for one of our show of shares or like this larger Be Part Equation events. Yeah, thanks very much, and we will circulate the slides and the video over the next few days. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Duncan.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.